we're teaching them to be responsible or not. We're teaching them to be compassionate or not. We should do it intentionally, and we should have no excuses and no tolerance for kids who are mistreating other kids. Like, you see schools where the kids are sitting in class, well behaved, and then they go out for their break and they're just incredibly unkind to each other, and especially unkind to kids who are slightly different, who are new or who are overweight or underweight or taller or shorter, or speech or language or background or clothes aren't quite right, or whatever the issue is. They're teased, they're bullied. Like, we need to say that's not going to happen in our school. Everyone's going to feel safe in our school.
Okay, so my guest today has reshaped, I believe, the way we think about what young people are truly capable of. Ron is the Chief Academic Officer for EL Education and a leading advocate around the deeper learning and craftsmanship and the character of education and what it brings. Decades of teaching has brought you out of the classroom. From what I have seen, what I've read about you, and have seen quite a bit when I was training to be a teacher myself, there's a 9-minute window that we all get shown over and over again, the butterfly. My view is, Ron, you really champion the authenticity of quality, young people's quality around that student work, and giving them the agency to produce the best version of what they can, and make sure they're proud, and their aspirations of purpose and care is always the leading aspect of their learning. So obviously there's some great books, that kind of the ethic of excellence, and leading your own learning, which is one of my favorites, and that has really inspired many educators, including myself, to really raise expectations without pressure, but with real meaning and purpose. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I'm really honored to be here with you.
Brilliant. So I have some questions, if you're happy for me to kind of go straight in and talk to you about them. So my first real question is around what role does meaningful, high quality student kind of work, how does that kind of play in lifting aspirations, especially young people who are impacted by poverty, whether that's social, cultural, economic or cognitive poverties, but what role does that have?
Great question, and thank you for the kind introduction. I would say I'm no expert in schools in the UK or schools in Britain, although I've had the privilege of working with schools in the UK. But because I'm based in the United States, I really am no expert on the British system. But I have been in education a long time. This is my 49th year in education. Almost 30 years in the classroom myself, and then writing books and doing research and also teaching at Harvard University in the US. And so lots of my life has been spent thinking about this. And the first thing I would say, Melissa, is that there's this strange disconnect between school and life. So in school, everyone is measured by exam results. Kids are measured by exam results, teachers, head teachers, district leads, trust leads. Exam results are pretty much anyone ever talks about or thinks about. But in life, it's not that way at all. So all of our students, when they're finished with school, will be judged for the rest of their lives, not by exam results, but by the quality of who they are as a human being and the quality of the work that they do. And it really doesn't matter what field they go into. The quality of their work is the way people will judge their work. They won't be judged by tests, they'll be judged by who they are. And we all care deeply about the quality of the work of the people we interact with. So if you go in for surgery, the quality of work that your surgeon does really matters to you. If you get on an airplane, the quality of work that your pilot does really matters to you. Even if you call a plumber to help fix something in your house, the quality of their work really matters to you. It really doesn't matter what profession, what trade, what role you're playing in society. The quality of your work matters. But it's not what we typically focus on in school. And it's not the fault of teachers. It's not the fault of head teachers. It's not the fault of trust. It's the pressure of the system makes us concerned about exam results rather than the quality of what students are actually doing. If a school chooses to focus on quality writing, quality mathematics, quality science, and quality character, being a good, trustworthy, respectful, responsible, courageous, thoughtful human being, it changes the vision of school into something that actually fits what we need for life.
Absolutely. And I think courageous is such a key word in that. And I often talk about we don't allow our learners to take risks. And I'm not meaning a health and safety based risk, but that risk of trying something new. I think that the words that come so often, especially when it comes to kind of further education, you pass something, and pass is such a passive word that how does that raise an aspiration? I just have to pass. It almost causes a desperation for a young person rather than I want courage to do
Right.
really well and bring that through. So I think that's really important, that just the terminology that we use, we have to be so careful, and it's terminology we want them to take with them as well. So it seems strange that we don't, bring those two together at all.
Absolutely. Yale, we use the term academic courage and intellectual courage, just like intellectual character and academic character. And if people say, what does it mean to have intellectual courage or academic courage? And I say, it means that in mathematics class, you're not hiding. You're not sitting there pretending you understand when you don't. It means you're raising your hand and saying, I'm confused here, or can I try this? Or this is my idea of how to solve this, but I'm not sure it's right. Or can I ask a question of this? It's taking the risk of making your learning public and struggling to make it good in the way that we all do on the football pitch, or the way we all do in an orchestra or in a play or in other parts of our life. Our work is out there for others to see. But kids in school play it safe. They hide. They don't want their teacher, their professor to know when they're confused because it's dangerous. And so it takes intellectual or academic courage to speak up, to stand in front of the class, to share your ideas, to actually make mistakes at times so that you can become better. But from dance and athletics and music and everything else, you don't get better unless you try and make mistakes.
And that loss of courageousness, I think, also restricts the creativity that young people can have. And that might be in England, there's a huge push in schools, rightfully, around oracy. But what we've got is young people that are coming through our school system who aren't courageous, aren't creative, because
Right.
it's the journey they have to go on in school is so narrow because of the tests, the high stakes assessment, and the way that they flow through as a young person's growing. That I'm doing a doctoral study at the moment on neural pruning and the loss of attachment and relational attachments, and the impact that we have at the end of our primary school system. So when you're 9, 10, 11, that phase, you're preparing for an exam. So your loss of explorative learning comes in, and then that neural pruning happens, and then you suddenly hit a cliff because you move off into secondary school where it starts all over again, and it's so difficult to navigate. And as you've said, ASDAN are always doing is, what does this look like in the community? What does this look like in the workforce? And I think there's also that real drive around where people belong. And that was one of the other reasons I really wanted to talk to you, because when I listened to you at Whole Education, it really resonated, some of the things you were talking around, and that kind of societal and community sustainability, I think, is key, because we always try so hard. If you want the best chance, you have to leave your community, rather than saying, how do we make the community more robust, more sustainable for the future? And that's about giving people opportunities. So my second question to you, how can schools create cultures of the craftsmanship, that belonging, the high expectations for all learners, not just privileged, but all
Right.
learners?
Well, I mean, it does take an intentional focus on the quality of work, which, as I was saying, schools don't typically focus on, even though they often say, of course, we care about the quality of work. But really, it's not what people focus on. And it's not their fault. It's the pressure of a system which makes us focus only on exam results. If you're going to shift the focus to work, then you are looking at student work all the time. Teachers and head teachers are looking at student work, discussing student work. The student work is being displayed everywhere, not just a few pieces, but all of the work. Kids are discussing the work. Teachers are discussing the work. They're keeping portfolios of work. Each student is keeping a portfolio of her work to be able to talk about it and defend. This is who I am as a mathematician. This is who I am as a writer. This is who I am as a scientist. If the focus truly were on the work, then the schools would treasure the work. Kids would be keeping the work, reflecting on the work. Teachers would be keeping the work, reflecting on the work. Teachers would keep models of work to inspire future students to see what strong work could look at. And so focusing on high quality academic work and high quality student work takes an explicit and intentional set of structures in the school where students know in this school they take our work seriously, not just our scores. And I think that's just a powerful shift.
I think it's a really powerful shift. I was in a school actually in East London yesterday, and they had, their boards, their display boards in the classroom, and one of them just had a few bits on and a lot of staples in it. And I kind of looked at the board, and immediately the teacher was, "That's our working display board," and actually that's a space that young people, when they've done something well that week, they can
Yeah.
put it on, and if they, they don't feel they've got anything, they don't have to put anything on there. But we can have display boards we put up at the start of term. But what is that? That's showing us what we did well before. And it might have keywords that we want to learn, but actually the pride that we want our young people to see that they can choose what they want on there as well. And they encourage to make sure everyone puts something on at some stage, and you bring out the hidden voices, but it's giving them courage to say, "Look what I did." And I think it's such a beautiful thing to see, and I've never seen it anywhere before. So it was a really lovely thing to see that school's really focused on what the young person also sees as quality and that they're proud of, which, they say that it's not the school's fault. This is teachers. There's a system that's restricting the track that they can go along.
Exactly so. Yes. The primary impediment to students doing well in school is their own motivation. But we often mistakenly think that motivation is just this fixed internal thing. Some kids are motivated, some kids are not. But that's not true at all. And the reason you know it's not true is that if you look at students, for example, in a secondary school, a teacher will say, well, Melissa, she's just not motivated. But what it really means is she's not motivated in my class with the assignment I'm giving her. Because if you follow Melissa throughout the day, you might find that in the very next class, she has got great motivation because that work's meaningful to her or she has a good relationship with that teacher. Or if there's Ron who's not motivated in any of his classes, turns out that on the football pitch or out in orchestra or in chess or in dance or in something else, the real me comes out and you see, oh, I actually can be a super motivated person if the work feels public and relevant for me. And so when we think of kids as motivated or unmotivated, what we really need to think about are we giving them the opportunity to be excited and motivated in their work by having meaningful work, but also by making the work public? Because when you're on the football pitch, your work is public, right? Everybody's watching you. When you're in the play, everything is public. When you're in a band or an orchestra, your work is public. Whenever you're doing something in public, you have this internal motivation to want to shine in front of the people you love and care about in your community. What if the student work was that way? What if the work they were doing in school was always public, where it was up in the school, up in the community, where the community was coming in to see you do it? Not just the extra things like drama and arts and athletics, but the math you do, the science you do, the writing you do. What if that were often public, where you felt like, I want to impress my community, I want to impress the people I love and admire with my academic work because I'm presenting it formally?
Yeah, again, that's why as a charity, our way of assessment, which is recognised in all the right places with Ofqual, etc., is portfolio based on for exactly that reason. And it can be contextualised. So it's we are it is English, and you are following a criteria around English and where we need to reach in English and that kind of pathway. But you can contextualise it to an area that you have a passion about, because we're going to get that engagement from them. And it's similar things that. And one of the things that I really loved about when you were talking about the adoption centre for the cats and how the young people in that community had, that they're demonstrating beautiful communication skills. They had demonstrated their art, and it didn't matter what level that art was at. They had expressed what they saw in that cat, and that equally were able to bring together the persuasive language of why we should be adopting that cat. And it's just all of those subtle things that a young person could flourish with, but they were also demonstrating all the skills that were needed from them. So it was so great to kind of see that. So you've worked with lots of young people, whether it's through the research or you testing and challenging the theories around your own thinking. What have you learned about fostering the student, the learner's voice, and that characters within the community? If there's real adversity in that community as well, how have you seen that voice being captured well?
Yeah, Melissa, most of my work has been with students who are in underserved communities. So, communities of poverty, whether urban poverty in cities or rural poverty. That has been the majority of my 49 years in this work. And I think we vastly underestimate the ability of kids from those underserved communities to be just as brilliant as kids in more financially privileged communities. I think genius is pretty equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And I think we forget that those kinds of students carry the same amazing potential as students anywhere. I think the closer the work that they have the opportunity to do matches the real life, the more they shine. Because school is an artificial place. I mean, I don't dislike school. I've spent my whole life working with schools, teaching in schools, but it's not the real world. And it's kind of a game. And if your parents went to university, if your parents are financially privileged, you have a lot of books at home, the dinner table conversations are more academic language, you grow up learning how to play that game of school really well. And so you really shine. If you grow up in a working class or an underserved community where there may not be many books in your home, where your parents may not have finished even secondary school, then you don't grow up learning how to play that game of school well, but you might have a tremendous amount of ability in the real world. You might be working in the family business every day after school. You might be taking care of your grandparents or your aunts or uncles or your younger siblings. You might be very active in the world and very capable in things. And when you give students the opportunity to do work that connects with the real world, often students in underserved communities have a lot more experience and a lot more wisdom and skill with things that connect. So if the project is a project that helps through academic work and through other kinds of work, helps your community in some way by tutoring younger children, by working with senior citizens, by revitalizing a child care center in your community, by working to test the water in your community or the air or the soil in your community using scientific equipment. The real life aspects of that, I often find that students from underserved communities are a lot more experienced and skillful than students that have been in a more artificial academic world.
And brings that sense of belonging where the courage comes back as well. And when I was ahead, our work and careers placement model was that young people would do it for a whole term, that they would go on a Monday or a Friday to the work placement, which was in a mixture of places. A lot of it was in charities because they were prepared to work with young people who were coming from a very different starting place to those within the mainstream schools. But I wanted them to do it in that way because I wanted them to show, you're not just part of a community for 10 days. You're part of a community every week. You show up, they're ready for you. You have a purpose because Mondays, these are the things that happen to set us up for the week. And it just meant that those young people were transitioning skills as well that they didn't realize they could have done. If they'd done a work week placement, they would have never have been able to embed that. And the difference and actually the flourish that came back from some of them because they've been in an adult work environment to then back into the classroom where they had to do their GCSEs and their exams was amazing because they suddenly saw how they can contextualize these skills. There was a purpose to it. Not
Right.
ideal doing the English GCSE for them, but actually there was purpose behind it. So it motivated them. Let me get this bit done because I know I want to be out there now. And it just gave them that inspiration, which was great to see that it worked as well. So
Exactly.
I talk quite often, I talk about equity a lot, but I also talk about this volatile, ambiguous and quite chaotic world, uncertain world that we live in. How can schools help students see themselves not as the problem or as problems to fix, so to speak. Because I think in England especially, there's increase in children not in education and employment after school is huge. It's increasing really heavily. The percentage of young people with what we have as education healthcare plans, so seen with special educational needs, is growing at a quite scary pace. But that kind of the seeing yourself not as a problem but as part of the solution for the community and contributors to the future. How can schools really help that happen?
Well, first and foremost, Melissa, schools need to be a place where kids feel respected and valued and safe, physically safe, emotionally safe, socially safe, which not all kids feel in going to school. And not all parents that are listening to this felt that way when they were in school. That's a conscious choice we need to make in our schools, to make them places that are physically, socially, and emotionally safe for all kids, especially kids that are different. Kids that think differently, kids that speak differently, kids that come from different background, kids who are physically larger or smaller than other kids. Like, if you are not perfectly fit in size and background and voice and accent and all those things as a kid, when you enter especially secondary school, you just want to fit in and you feel like this is not a place that I belong. A school has to be a place where every kid feels like he or she or they belong. It just has to, which means we have to consciously focus in our schools on character. Schools will say, well, character is not our purview. Character is for church, or it's for family. It's not for the role of schools. And the truth is, we are all teaching character all day long in school. We have kids for 6 hours, 7 hours. We're shaping their character whether we want to or not. And we're either doing it intentionally and well to make them more tolerant, more uh, respectful and responsible, more courageous and kind, or less so. And so we're teaching them to be responsible or not. We're teaching them to be compassionate or not. We should do it intentionally, and we should have no excuses and no tolerance for kids who are mistreating other kids. Like, you see schools where the kids are sitting in class, well behaved, and then they go out for their break and they're just being incredibly unkind to each other, and especially unkind to kids who are slightly different, who are new, or who are overweight or underweight or taller or shorter, or whose speech or language or background or clothes aren't quite right, or whatever the issue is. They're teased, they're bullied. Like, we need to say that's not going to happen in our school. Everyone's going to feel safe in our school. That's a starting place. And that's not an issue just for underprivileged communities. It's equally an issue for privileged schools where people pay a lot of money to send their kids to school. Those kids can get bullied just as easily. This is a conscious choice we need to make our schools a model of kids have to be a good human being here, and adults have to be good human beings in the school. We need to look out for each other in the school.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think that there's that the teachers and schools need to become brave. And it might be that the system isn't as
Yeah.
effective as it needs to be, but it's demonstrating this is what we need it to be. I've been doing some work with the University of West of England, and we were looking at professional identity of teachers, so newly qualified teachers, and where they think their professional identity sits, and then they go in and 6 months later, where did it land, or where is it now
Yeah.
sitting? So my question to you is not going to be about other people, but actually, when you first started teaching and working in education a few decades ago, um, what would you tell yourself now if you were just starting back in education as a teacher? What you've seen, what you've learned, what would you tell that younger version of yourself now?
When I look back, when I started teaching, which was 49 years ago, a really long time ago, I had great fellow teachers, great teachers who are mentors to me. And I think the way the teaching profession works in the United States, teaching is a very solitary profession. You go to university to study to be a teacher, and then you're put in a classroom and you're on your own. You really are not working through an apprenticeship and a mentor
No.
with a mentor in the classroom with you for years. I worked as a carpenter for 20 years. You don't start by saying, like, let's build a whole house, let's build a whole building yourself. You work as an apprentice for a long time around someone who can mentor you before you're given tremendous responsibility
Yeah.
of doing something on your own. You would never hire a builder who just left school and say, "Build my house." And yet we take teachers directly out of school, stick them in a classroom by themselves, and we say, "Teach our kids." And they don't have that mentorship. They don't have that guidance. I was very privileged because I entered a small rural school community where other teachers were great and where they did mentor me. But I made a lot of mistakes in the early years, and I think one of the things that I didn't take seriously enough was I needed to differentiate much more to meet the needs of kids who thought differently, who had processing issues, who had different ways of understanding. If I were to go back and coach that younger version of myself, I would say, think about this kid, think about this kid, think about this. The way you're framing things is not working for every kid. The way you're structuring your class is not working for every kid. And some kids are going to need a lot more structure, and you need to be able to make that happen for them. Some kids need more freedom of thinking for this. And I just assumed because I loved the kids and they loved me that that relationship would win out and it would be all fine. But I didn't do as good a job, especially with kids with special needs, as I could have.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I threw that question at you at the last minute there. I think is definitely something that I in various conversations often talk about, the fact that education in the kind of the 80s and 90s worked. Why have we changed? It worked for the workforce as well, because there was that more community feel in schools. That school, as a teacher, the networking happened. I wasn't teaching in that time. It was the end of the 90s that I came into teaching. But even at that stage, the curriculum and the system felt more agile to work with the learners and meet them where they're at. But equally, we had great mentors, and the staff room was a place where we really did talk about, how are you working with that young person? It was a conversation about getting the best out of your students, whereas I just don't think the luxury of that is there anymore for teachers, and so they can't keep that professional identity. They can't keep being the best version of themselves that shows up for those classes at times as well. It's got complicated, hasn't it, to say the least. But thank you so much for your time, and obviously there is a bit of a time difference, so I appreciate you coming and speaking to us. And yeah, I'm hoping to hear more, especially the XP schools work you've been doing. It was great to hear about that when I heard you speaking, and they're an impressive group, aren't they? So it would be great to see how their work could impact on the broader education system in the UK over time. Would be amazing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Melissa. And I would encourage your listeners to visit XP at some point. I try to go every year to work with it's a trust of 8 schools mostly in the Doncaster area that are mostly serving underserved students or students that come from low income families. And yet the work you see everywhere is just brilliant, and their GCSE scores are great too. It's not a choice. I'm not anti-exam. I think we should have all kids prepared to do really well on exams, but they should also really do well in the work. And so what's most impressive about XP is when you walk in, there's beautiful, brilliant, sophisticated student work on every wall, and the students you meet are really capable of talking about who they are as learners and thinkers because they're practiced in it, because they present their own learning and their own work all the time. It's a very impressive place.
I remember in lots of parent meetings sort of saying, they can have the 9 or 10 pieces of paper that say they have passed or they've got a 7 or an 8 in this, but if they don't know how to use the pieces of paper, there is little to them. And I think it's so important. We've just the UK has just released its youth census data, and it's over 8,000 young people have completed it, and all the way through it, the main thing is they're called Gen Z, and we're told we're entitled and we're lazy and stuff. But they're like, but what we want to learn most in schools is how to think critically. We don't know how to do it. We want to know
Yeah.
how to be a team player and collaborate, but we're never given the opportunity anymore. So it's so interesting listening to those voices that the young people are saying we want more of that model that schools like XP have, and they're
Right.
asking for it because they can even see the gaps themselves. So there's there's a shift that will happen, and it needs to. It's just when is the big question, isn't it? But again, thank you so much for speaking to us today. And yeah, it was great to have this conversation.
Thank you, and keep up the great work. I very much appreciate you being a voice for the potential of students to do way more than we think they can possibly do.
And they definitely can.